AV equipment, so we are recording right now. So.
We are? Okay, well, let's kick it off then. So, yes, thank you guys for coming for the Jodo seminar review from beautiful Grand Rapids, Michigan. Got a decent amount of notes to go over here. Let's, where do you want to start? Do you just want to?
Why don't we talk about
Kihon, specifically, I guess we're gonna start with Kihon.
as it relates to kata, maybe, or I don't know. Anything. You could just kind of start going through the kata trees, maybe.
Well, we'll start here. So, a couple of the kind of overarching points that something wanted to talk about, or that they felt we were lacking on, if I can find them. A lot of timing and distance, structure, and posture. So we got some work to do with like Kuritsuke, making sure that looks correct when we're catching people. The angles or geometry as well. Got to rework a lot of that. Going back to Kuritsuke, for a lot of us are dropping down out of, or we're kind of like slumping down, and we don't have to do that unless there's a huge disparity in height. You really shouldn't have to crouch down. That was one thing that we kept constantly getting nabbed on.
Do you remember the 3 or 4 things they said at the end of the seminar grading, where they were like, these are things that we saw people need to fix?
That's what I'm going
through.
Oh,
it is. Okay.
That's what I was saying. So that was Lewis's comment about Kuritsuke being too tall.
So, Mike, you said Kuritsuke being too tall?
Sorry, Kuritsuke, you're being too short. So you
Too short. Okay. So people are basically, when they're doing their Kuritsuke motion over their head, they're actually like they're crouching down to try to do the Kuritsuke instead of keeping their back straight. Is that what you kind of mean?
Not even your back. It's like your legs. Like don't bend you can have a bend in your legs, but don't be like squatting.
Gotcha.
Unless you're practicing with somebody that's like 3-4 feet shorter than you, which we don't have any of those in the dojo, you shouldn't have to do that.
You did say something about eyes. The Joe should be at the eye level height of the opponent, the techie.
Correct. When you catch in Kuritsuke, you're catching at their eye height.
Exactly.
Yep. If you're doing it by yourself, then it just is to your height. Let's see. Another point we had there. King Sensei talked about for number 3 and number 7 specifically. They're now telling us that we don't want to roll around the end of the jo after we've gotten folded over on the Kuritsuke. So what we were doing before is, we would get rolled over, our hands get locked up as a tachi, and we're sliding off the jo, and we were pivoting around the jo. And they're telling us that doesn't make any sense. Why would you put yourself in front of the weapon? So you're just supposed to kind of slide and then pivot, but not go around the end of the jo. The jo has to adjust and bring it back on target when they turn the body.
Okay.
Let's see.
So, let's just do that really quick.
So, yeah. Sensei and the other mic are going to demo this for you right now. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see clearly.
So yeah, you're more like number 8 right there. So Sensei's showing what we were doing. And we were going around. They're saying
so when we roll, the Tachi's job is to get off of the line. So go back up to like where you're catching me. Catch it. So 45 though. Yeah. So as he rolls me, if I just stand, if I'm in front of him like this and I finish where his feet are making a line and I'm in front of that line, this is not a good place for the Tachi to be. The Tachi needs to always consider their next move or their cut. They're not just passive. So as he rolled me, I should kind of step back or realign so that our feet are on the same line essentially. Okay. So once I'm here now, I should go off, but then stay off to the side, which forces the Joe to realign to the new target.
Gotcha.
Instead of open and then stay straight, it's slide off and then pivot on that right foot so that now you're off the line and they have to realign to you. That's what he's talking about.
all right, so that was King Sensei's big gripe with us. His closing comments. Did anybody get Sarah or anybody? Did you guys have what Scott Sensei said?
Scott Sensei also talked about making sure that you're accurately striking and making a motion. So everyone needs to go to the right.
Sure.
Actively take a strike.
So Sarah was just filling in the gap in my notes there. So the last one that talked about was Mike Scott, and he was talking about making sure that when we're executing the kata or whatever else that we're doing, this is mostly on the Tachi side, that we're actually doing real cuts, and we're not just flipping the sword out there essentially. Like, you don't necessarily have to like try to kill your opponent, but like you should be swinging in such a way that you're trying to make contact.
And the distance has to be accurate as well.
Oh, exactly.
Where they go.
Mm-hmm.
And just throw it out there. It's gotta be
So the other comments were making sure, number one, that your cuts are making it where they need to be. So you're cutting for where the Joe is, not where they're gonna be, because you're not this omnipotent swordsman that knows the future. So you're cutting at your target, and then that allows the Joe to react.
And the vice versa of that too.
And the same that applies to the Shi as well. So try to make sure that when you're going through the kata, that you're showing the decision points for the kata as well. And it's not just this chain of different movements that you're doing together. Like, obviously we know what the next step in the kata is supposed to be, but you should be portraying, or you should make it look like you don't know what your next move is, even though you do.
And once in relation to that, once you're committed to do it, you don't hesitate. Made that decision.
Correct. So yeah, what Michael was saying is, once you make those decision points, then make sure that you're following through and doing the motion completely, and yeah, completely and yeah, together. Let's see. I guess I'm just going to start with what I had for top of notes, and we'll just kind of go through that way. So the primary focus that, so the primary instruction that I received, or me and Sensei and Michael received, was on 5 through 9, because that's what we were testing on. So number 5, the first point I want to make on number 5 would be when you're starting on the tachi side, when you're going out and you're going to you're making like the motion towards their eyes. It doesn't. They said it should just be a natural motion, so just out and down. Versus before, we were kind of told to kind of make like this kind of flicking type thing, and then like just pull. More just a continuous natural motion, and the blade should be at an angle when it's on your hip. Some people were getting the blade down when they had it on their hip versus at an angle. Does that make sense? Do you guys know which part I'm talking about? You want me to show it?
I'm a little confused at what you're referring to exactly.
Sure. So sure. So this is number. So in number 5, we get there. He's in. I don't even remember what the name of that stance is, but essentially, before we were kind of doing this kind of flick out here and then pull back here. We're saying more kind of naturally kind of coming down here, and I'm from this direction. Instead of not point the blade down, leave it naturally on the same angle that you brought it down. So it doesn't make sense to me to bring this down and then twist it this way for no reason. You just keep it on that same angle pointed at your target. And what Sensei was talking about was you're doing this and you're controlling your space. If he's not going to do anything while I'm there. Now I'm here. And what they talked about, the timing on this is however fast you do this motion, your thrust has to be essentially twice as fast as that. So if I go, my thrust has to be like lightning fast. So in reality, what it is it's more, this is kind of slow, and then, oh.
So even the thrust should be more deliberate, is what you're saying.
Yes, the thrust is always deliberate.
But I mean, in the sense of like, you don't want to strike fast, you want to strike deliberate. So you want to move in a way that is going to make it look nice.
So what Sensei was just reiterating is you go, the all boils down to that whole go slow when you need to go slow and then go fast when you need to go fast. There's no reason for you to go super fast on this part.
Gotcha.
But yeah, but you don't want your, like if I'm really trying to poke him, it doesn't make sense for my thrust to be, yeah, you know, because that's not going to do anything. So like you said, no matter what speed it's at, it should be deliberate. It could be super, like it could be fast, it could be, or it could still be slower, but it's still deliberate. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they're skipping ahead to number 6, but yeah. Yeah. No, I just ended that one. Let's see. I don't think I had any other. The last point I had on number 5, I guess, which isn't anything super new, but making sure that you are extending to the full length of the Jo when you're doing that transition back to the final Hikiotoshi. Because, you know, you strike down the sword, you're pressuring the eyes, and then as he goes back into Hato, then you're pulling back into Hikiotoshi.
That was as long as it's body.
Yes, if it fits your body type. So, you know that.
I know that, but I'm gonna remind all of you of that.
Sure. So yeah, keep that in. So for Sarah, got some clarification at camp too for her, since she has shorter arms or whatnot. She can't, you know, she can't articulate the Jo the same way that we can. So for some of her, she is not actually going to the end of the Jo because it's essentially, yeah, it makes it so she's breaking the technique just to try to get her hands to where they need to be. So keep that in mind when you're working with her. Some of the stuff she's doing will be slightly different. That was the other thing. So on that part too, as you're getting ready to do that transition back into Hikiotoshi, when the Tachi is retreating back into Hato, and you're getting ready to switch into Hikiotoshi, you should keep the Jo pointed on their eyes as you're bringing that leg forward, and then make your transition.
And that can just be something that we could just basically place against all form of kata basics and pretty much everything, that the Josaki remains pointed at the opponent, applying pressure, correct?
Pretty much, yes.
You're right at what we're doing.
So they're going to show part of it here. So you struck down the sword, pressuring 1, pressuring 2, and now at this point here, he's pulling back into Hato, Sensei's keeping pressure, and then he's going to the end of the Jo and back. So watch it one more time. Pressure, pressure, keeping Joseki in the eye, and then back. Okay. So that was number 5. That wasn't anything too earth-shattering there. Number 6, however, was some interesting stuff on number 6. And that there were 2 different ways that the sensei were doing it, and according to like Rondell Sensei said, you can kind of do it either way, but he kind of showed us a different way from what we were shown. Sensei, do you want to demo it?
Sure.
The old, yeah, he referred to it as a bait and switch. So, you want to narrate it?
Right. So why don't we do it more like this at an angle so that they can see? So where am I at? Yeah, it would be this way. Yep. I don't know if I can see. You can see me. Yep. So basically, when he comes and he makes the strike, what we were doing originally, which is what Lewis Sensei, I think, was one who taught us this. We open the foot, we go back, and it's big over the back, kind of over the back of the shoulder, kind of like a sword strike, right? So again, that was open and then big, okay? So bait and switch takes, you still move the foot the same way, but instead of bringing it over your shoulder, you bring the jaw up and you just step back. So one more time on that. You still open up the foot. He didn't say step the foot, even though the book kind of says step the foot. You've opened, basically pivoting on the heel, brings it up so that you actually are kind of almost covering and then pushes it down. And the way he did it, he almost brought it out so that he pressures the eyes and the face at the same time and then steps back. And you still end up in honte, right? Like this. So again, just without even the tachi, you still open up the same, you're just bringing it up and then you're stepping through. That's how you remember too, right? Yep. Yep. Neither one is right or wrong. It's just, I'm going to try to do the bait and switch because I want to align with throwing offense as much as I can, but it's not wrong to do what we were doing. Bait and switch, I think, gives you a little quicker action. So whatever you choose, I guess.
Yeah, the footwork was, there was some mixed opinions on the footwork on that too, or there's some turmoil in terms of the guidance on that. So we're just going to stick with the same footwork that we've been doing because that's what Grondal Sensei told us to do. So, any other Sensei really kind of hit on this point earlier, but for the Taishi ski transitions on this one, we want to be snappy on those. So when after you hit the uchi and he starts to retreat fast, you want to snap into that kaishi ski as fast as you can. Once you're there, now you own the guy because you're essentially like a loaded gun ready to go off. So it doesn't have to be kaishi ski and then immediately bring in the attack. It can be getting the kaishi ski. You can take half a beat and then go in for the ski at that point because you already control the area at that point. And ideally, if you can do that, you should be able to do that fast enough where your yoi or ready position ends the same time that the tachi gets up into jodan. So that's another point for something else to think about when you are the tachi is making sure that you're moving in such a way that it gives the shi the ability to move at the proper speed. So if you snap back into jodan immediately, there's no way that they're going to essentially be able to keep up with you. Now, if you and your partner if you're trying to go that fast, it's something that you guys can do, but just make sure that you guys are communicating and you know what tempo that you're going for. And for, I would say 9 times out of 10, like slower is going to be better. That was even something they were talking about prior to testing and stuff, is like people need to slow down. People are going too fast. Other notes on number 6. That's all I had for number 6, unless you guys had something different. Another thing, well, there was one more thing. So on all these different tie sheets, so whether it's this one or if it's the one in number 8, this is a really, I guess even the one in number 4, like it's okay to cheat up your back leg or whatnot after you've made, or as you're going back, to help get your body open and to make it so it's not such an unstable stance for you. So if your stance is too deep prior to you going into kaishi, it's okay to kind of collapse those feet as you're coming together. So that way you're more stable, and it actually gives you a little more distance by cheating up that back foot. Well, the biggest problem, yeah, Michael was making the point, making sure that you have to square your hips as you're making your skis, but prior to that, even you got to make sure that you're getting your hips open when you're going into the ready position. So when you're going into either Gakute ski, Taishi ski, your belly button should be pointed essentially 90 degrees from your target. And then from there, you're bringing your hips back in line as you're thrusting. They were beating us up on that pretty hard.
Which is really hard if you don't pull up your back foot.
Yep, if you're super stretched, simply just saying super hard to do that if you don't bring up that back foot. That's true. And the other thing was, when you're performing these strikes, if pretend this sword is a Jo, making sure that your hand is in the proper position, which means it should be over the top of the end of the Jo. Like it shouldn't be on the side, it shouldn't be on the bottom, it should be on top, because that's where you're ultimately when you push out, you're gonna end in a honte position with your hand over the top. So why would you have your hand open or underneath? Because when you do that, then this has to rotate as you're making a strike, and then it's going to start doing one of these things as it's going to the target. So keep it over the top so it's just going straight toward the target. Okay.
We were also told about the
That's what I was talking about. So Michael's point was they talked about thinking. So think about that as like kind of like Jo Tenouchi. So making sure that you're over the top and you're kind of making sure that you're solid on that. Okay, probably enough for number 6. Number 7. Spent a lot of time on number 7 because it's probably the hardest kata in the set. First thing would be is that initial strike that everybody has so many problems with. The first thing is that is when so if you remember you guys remember how number 7 goes first off?
Just give me the name of number 7, and then I could probably piece it together from there. It's Kasumi, right?
Kasumi. Yeah.
Okay, I know which one. I know which strike you're talking about then.
Yeah. Yeah, let's just here. I will just show you.
Fair enough.
Take my notes with me. Okay. So this part we get so sensei comes in, I'm in Kasumi. We make a latte. For here, so you can't see this really, but my Joe, don't move sensei, my Joe isn't pointed anywhere at him when we make this. Like if I bring this up, it goes way, way over here. So I'm not pointed at him at all. But they're saying, we've talked about this a little bit before, you pull back. Now I've slightly changed the direction of my target. I'm now pointing at his right eyeball is where I'm at. And now from here, one of the points that Grondal Sensei had is when we're doing this strike, we want to think about both of these wrists should be moving the same. So what you're actually kind of doing is you're like kind of rolling these wrists up slightly or making sure that they're both the same. Because now when I bring this up for a strike, this is in line with the Joe and I'm coming over the top. So versus if I leave this here and I don't move it, now it's doing this weird thing where it's like my wrist is broken and then I have to like try to straighten it out before I make the strike again, which is no bueno. So by just simply thinking about keeping these two wrists pointed the same way, I'm able to make that strike a lot easier. The other thing too that King Sensei talked about is think about this front hand. Like if you're missing a lot, what people are doing is they're pulling back and they're pulling this hand in and they're missing the sword. So one way he talked about is think about almost striking with this hand. So if I was here, think about this, kind of like what we talk about, and sometimes when we're trying to get the finer points of Hikiotoshi, thinking about striking with this hand, the same thing here. So think about striking here. So keeping this hand out there until you finish the strike at least. So I'm here, I'm up. You can also pivot the hips a little bit. Lewis Sensei he was like winding up almost over here when he was doing it. The key part with this is make sure you're not pivoting until after you've made the strike. Because if I go here and then I pivot, like now I'm not even on the right point. So yeah, keeping your target in mind is your opponent, and then you can come up in. So to summarize all that up, here, pull back, point at the eyeball, think about the wrist moving together. So as I bring this front wrist up, the left one should, or the back one should come up, keeping that front hand out there until I strike, and then coming in. Yeah, King wasn't, but let's see. Camera dude. We talked about not rotating them into the Joe. Quick note on Kasumi that makes kind of talking to Grondal Sensei about that, just trying to make sure being in the right stance for it. The easiest way to get into that, the easiest way to make your Kasumi right is think about it almost, think about it like you're getting ready to strike. Think about it as if you're getting ready to strike in a Gakute uchi. So you're here, like you can't have your your elbows and stuff pointed all wonky, right? So like, so you don't need to be here. So I'm just talking about, so for Kasumi, you're here. Think about like that you're getting ready to actually strike somebody from here. So it doesn't make sense to be here because I can't strike like this. So go back. So if I'm here, my body's open. I'm here, and I want everything going this direction, right? So this is almost, essentially, it's kind of like, it's almost like the Joe's version of like Jodan, kind of. You're here, and you should just be able to go, bam. That's the idea here. So you don't want to be here. You don't want to be doing anything weird this way. You want to be ready to strike. So not that we habitually had our hands too low. It's more you're in that striking position. So you're already, one hand's on the end of the Joe, the other hand is about at that quarter distance when you're here. You're just ready to come in and so if you think about it that way, you shouldn't have any problems getting into Kasumi, or hopefully that makes a little more sense of why we go into that stance. Number 7, I could have stayed out there. I'm just taking my notes with me. Our geometry is still not quite right on number 7. So when you're going, I'll do it from this way. So if I'm here in my Hikiotoshi, when I go back, so my feet are about just a little bit past my shoulder length. When you watch Grondal Sensei do this, when he goes back to step on his tail, he's stepping almost like when we do like warm-ups, when we talk about like 2 shoulder width, he's going from 1 shoulder width to 2 shoulder width out here, and then he's coming up. And it should be 45 degrees to your opponent. And he talked about thinking about this front foot, your middle toe points to the big toe of the tachi that's sticking out. So that will help you kind of gain. That's one thing we can think about to try to get our distance a little better. The other thing he said is when I'm standing here, I should be able to see the tachi's chest. Like if I'm this way, if I'm too far this way, I wouldn't be able to see anything here. Even when as far as to say that it's almost better for you to be more open than closed. This would be a good point to talk about Kuritsuke. So for Kuritsuke, he said you just make a banzai and just drop it down on your head, and that's where your Kuritsuke goes. So it's centered in between. Like a lot of us tend to be like more like this way or this way. It's right in the middle. So banzai, down, and then at an angle. Elbows still have to be in line under the Joe, like we talked about. And also when we do this, you need to make sure that you're outside of the tachi's body, because if you're in too close, they can literally just cut right through, they can literally break right through this guard and still cut you. Scott Sensei did that to us a couple of times. So you need to be, if you're too close, you lose all the extra kind of support from your skeletal structure. It just breaks down. another point that they talked about too was thinking about when we're in creek, say, before we were kind of like in this kind of hammer type position here, right? Think about when you're doing these things almost the same way that you're holding a sword. So instead of having two hammers, think about like two sword grips. Specifically, like you're almost pretty much just using these two pinkies. Like, so think about like even when you're up in creep, okay, you're here. I'm just thinking about controlling everything with these two pinkies here. And it actually makes it a lot easier to have this in the proper position when my hands are relaxed versus here. Because now everything's rigid and this doesn't want to move quite right. Here, nicely fits in there. And it makes it easier to do like the roll, which we also need to work on too. This wasn't just, we'll show this for you here. This wasn't just us, but a lot of people are doing weird things. It's probably easier to show it this way so they can see me. So if he's striking me, what we got here? Hold on while we adjust the camera.
Okay.
So this is about right. I'm outside his body. I got my feet pointed the right way. I can see his chest. That means I'm at about 45. I'm catching the sword about at his eye height. I'm probably maybe a hair low. But what a lot of us are doing is we're kind of like pushing in and like trying to roll around this way and do weird stuff like that. Like your hands literally go from up here to down here. It's almost like one of those dumb, like, you know, it's like the keyhone, but think about like the little golden caps or whatnot that sit here and do that thing. You're just going from here to here, here to here. You're still getting in your pocket, but you don't have to push in and do all these weird things. You just go from here. What I'm doing is I'm pulling him offline. I've got his wrist controlled now. Once I get his sword and his arms away from the balance of the center of his body, now I got both arms here. I just get him a little further and I bring him straight down. And yeah, he has to, if Sensei doesn't move back, I'm essentially pulling his whole, essentially just like pulling him down. So he has to kind of shuffle back like you talked about before. Otherwise his entire body structure collapses and then he's just going to be a pile on the floor. So Hitachi needs to give a little bit, otherwise he's going to get folded over. So I'm here, I'm out.
Here, I'm in front of the line. This is a disadvantage. You can't see on the camera, but
Yeah.
Michael, once you hold it back up.
So now on this one, he didn't move back at all. So now he's all jammed up and folded over. So now he can't really do anything. So if he tries to, he slides back so he can maintain his posture and still potentially do something versus being doubled over. That's part of it.
So just talk to this. Once
Okay, so I'm here. Like I said, you're just bringing it out together. Once I get it out here, I've made contact with his wrist, and now I'm just bringing his sword and his weight off center. And then once I get it to about here, I just bring it straight down. I just simply try to rip him to the ground. And that's all with these little your pinkies here. So yeah, and then this part was what we had talked about previously, was once we get here, when he slides off and rolls around, he's not going around the end of my Joe anymore. He's going slightly that way. So when I open, I need to find the target again and then go get him. So this sensei point there is, by them making that change, you have to be aware that we're going to start going off into different angles now on the kata. It's going to be a little harder to stay kind of on that same line. So just be aware of your surroundings, or especially when you're the sword and you're getting pushed into other lanes. We had one guy, there was another pair working at the same time as me and Sensei. And essentially we were up at the point where I had Sensei up in Three-Stay, and this other guy came blowing in right as I started to roll Sensei, and we wound up rolling both of our weapons like right into the back of his head. He just came flying in there, and yeah, he lived, but
That's good. Glad he lived.
he didn't make, well, I was going to say he didn't make that mistake again, but he almost did the exact same thing on the next repetition after we spaced out even more. So we didn't hit him again, but I don't really know if he learned his lesson.
I'm just going to say, just for the sake of it, it still just seems like one of those things that seems different than what I'm used to, especially with our class, because we're also EI as well as Joe, that controls space right there. Even if you crossed into another person's line, you would know how to kind of make sure you mitigate that much. And if he got hit directly head on, I mean, we should still be cautious of space when we're utilizing Joe, correct? It should be very similar in the same context of EI as well, that we control the space at all times.
Well, to be honest, the space at this facility was extremely limited. But yeah, he should have been
That's
watching. Talk about we're moving over the steps. You used to be like together, right? And now it's just a certain point. Yeah.
Sure. So what they're asking is wanting me to go through or reiterate. Kind of touched on it slightly. And I don't need a Tachi. I don't even need the Tachi for this piece of it. So thinking about when we're here, when we're going to do this roll, you're not getting here and kind of pushing. I'm not trying to push the sword out this way and like roll down like this. I'm literally taking it from here, these two pinkies. I'm just bringing it off. Both your hands should be moving. You look at from this direction, they should both be moving together at the same time. This one doesn't get in front. This one doesn't do anything in the back. They're both together. And you don't want to move until you've already got him off balance and you started to bring him down. So you're getting here. Okay, now he's off. Really, almost till you get to about shoulder height or chest height even, that you get here, and then boom, bring it down. Versus before, yeah, like I said, we were kind of doing this whole like, bringing it in and kind of bringing it out and doing weird stuff like that, and that's not what it is. So once again, just here to here, here to here, and you just happen to step right about. That's all it is. I find that it helps to try to unlearn those bad muscle habits or muscle memory is to just really concentrate on that backhand. Just really think that that hand stays where it is and just goes from up here to down here. Everything else should kind of stay. Think about, we also want to have the good tenouchi when we're doing kayakari on that one as well. So not, once again, not super hammer grip and stretch. This hand needs to be loose so that way you can perform the slide. I'm putting this at my opponent's face, right? And I'm sliding up, getting this bottom hand goes to the frigate. This is pretty much in their face, and then I'm pushing forward. My wrists are behind. They're not out that way or anything weird. The bones are behind the jaw, pushing that way.
They were talking about a strike, not a push. Two hands and lower hand.
Sure. Yes, I didn't get that part, but the other guys are saying focus on, or the sensei were talking about, really think about that as a strike itself. So you're here, and then you're actually, boom, striking the opponent. Now don't punch your opponent in the face, but I mean, think.
No, just relax. I think the key is always positioning off of balance. And the right hand doesn't slide down.
Yeah, which isn't anything new. They did reiterate that. Final note.
You talk about being closer though and having to go straight up and go forward.
Yeah, they reiterated that. So Sensei was just saying, yeah, remember you. Rondell Sensei talked about this in our last virtual seminar too, but the Joe isn't, you're not pushing the Joe forward, the Joe is not backwards on it, straight up. So you slide it up, and the Joe should pretty much be straight up and down. One thing we did see at the seminar is the hands, when the sensei are doing it, their hands tend to be a lot closer to the Tachi's body than what we were doing. Before we were like 1.5, 2 feet away probably. They're really closing that distance, getting these fists almost on the body of the Tachi, because what they want is to stretch them up and get them off their balance so they can push them back. I think that was the main parts for number 7. Number 8. First part on that was, so for number 8, if you remember, you start in Shune and then you're moving your hand. You're kind of like waiting till the Tachi gets close and then you put your hand on the 3rd step. The quick point they made on that is don't bring your hand like around and out like this, because that creates more of a target for it. Think about bringing it more over the top and down. So don't bring this big motion out to grab it this way. Bring it kind of up and over so it's a more direct route and doesn't create as much of a tantalizing target out here when you do it. This one tied into one of the main points that the sensei brought up at the end, which was know your distance. So, and don't strike where the future opponent is, strike where the current opponent is. So when you're the Joe, you should be striking to where the Tachi's head is currently, not where it's going to be. And you're only trying to hit them with this much. If you're striking so deep that you're hitting them back here, you're doing it wrong. There's no point of you hitting them here because you've lost all your advantage with the Joe, which is the distance essentially. So you only need to hit them with this end up here. So we also talked about on this one, they also talked about the hand position, or how to properly do the catch on this one. So when I'm here, so no, I'm good. So I'm here, I pull back, I slide, I make my strike to where his head was, right? What they're talking about here is there were some varying opinions on this, but so like some of the sensei are kind of bringing it to the chest and then up. I think the best way I saw it described was the bottom hand, or this hand here doesn't move. Just think about bringing this hand to where it needs to be to catch. You're bringing it here, and I've naturally just protected myself because where was that sword strike coming? It was coming right here, right? You're literally just taking it from here to here, and then it just slides in to make that catch at the end. And I'm opening my body again. And then from here, you're just doing that roll, right? But going back to this strike here, I'm striking here, leave the right hand where it is, pull the left hand back to where it's going to be. And then as you're rotating your body, this right hand slides up into each day, and you're just right where you need to be. And this, when you finish this, the tip of your Joe should be pointed at your opponent's eyes. You're doing it right. On the Tachi side, pretend this is a Tachi, they talked about making, I guess we're going to do a weapon change. Each go die. Okay. So, Tachi, Jondo, since they talked about, don't make this any more complicated than it needs to be. This is just you're just stepping to the side and you're bringing the sword up almost like, it's almost like you talked about a barbell. Like you're curling a barbell. So it's literally boom, boom. I should be able to see the shi through my hand. And my sword isn't way down here, not back here. It's literally just boom, boom. They did talk a little bit about the whole, like, well, make sure that you're kind of twisting the sword a little bit so you're not catching on the edge and such. But more important thing is just making sure that you're sidestepping, curling up, catching the sword here. And when you go to make that cut, you're coming off, you're cutting, and stepping. Make sure that you're not breaking your wrist before the Joe hits you. It should be a cut from here to here. If you don't cut like this, make the actual cut and let the Joe break the wrist. Yes, sir.
They talk
They did not. She was asking if they talked at all about the target. Mm-hmm. I think in the green book, we can look it up, but the green book actually says your target is where the neck meets the shoulder, essentially. It's yeah, right in the crook here. You're definitely not trying to cut them here. You're not trying to cut them up here. I think it's, yeah, more where the shoulder meets the neck. They did not.
Cut to the right side of sheep's neck.
So green.
Right where the neck meets the shoulder.
Is that what it says?
Oh, the right side of sheep's neck. That would
Yeah.
say,
So the green book just says cut to the right side of the sheet. So. Somewhere in there. We talked about that. Sorry, my notes are not in order, so I have to hop around.
on these CDs.
That's all I had for number 8. So number 9. The thing they talked about here is so for the Joe side, this is another one where you're in costume at the start, right? You come in, you make the wash day. When you're going to do this here for this next part, think about keeping your Josaki on the target. So don't bring, so really think about this doesn't move off the target. It's very easy when we roll this up for it to go somewhere off in the left field, technically right field from where I'm standing here. But think about this, the Josaki stays on the target. So that way you're actually hitting where you're intending to. They said, because there were people that were kind of hitting all over the place. And what's happening is people are bringing this off target over here and then having to bring it back on target when it gets to the top. So instead, keep this on target. And once again, street skate on this. It's not here, it's here. So that means that you really actually have to kind of get in a little closer. This shouldn't be super far down. The other interesting thing about this too, that they said that it just keeps going back and forth, is that both of these are actually strikes. They're not key. So the key on this, on both of them, should be A instead of ho. Before we were saying ho and then ho, but it's actually A. And you're pivoting, and you're actually striking, which is why it's called Ryuchi instead of Rai Cease. It's a strike, not a cease. So keep Joseki in the center. Head in the middle on Krike. Talk about CI. So on the sword side of this one, in order to help, well, not just to help the sheath, but also just to make the kata real, if you're going to give them extra time to perform their technique, give them more time on the backswing versus on the cut. So don't make, this is that whole, what Sensei was talking about, move slow when you need to move slow, move fast when you need to move fast. So if you need to, so you make the first strike, you can be a little slower on the swing back, but still make the next strike fast. So if you're going to add in that extra time for your opponent, give it to them on the backswing when you're going back. So cut. Cut. Yep. Like we were just talking about too, like we were talking about a couple weeks ago with like number 7, make sure you're not moving as the shi until the sword is already committed, which makes it even harder because now you've got like half of a breath, not even, to get out of the way and strike the guy. So another thing that they talked about on this one, this is more just like style points, but it kind of makes sense too. Because like after you've made the second strike and you're on that hip or whatnot, it's okay to keep that Joe attached to your opponent for a little bit. So as they're retreating, it's okay for this to kind of stay on. Like if you come up here, so I've got this here. Got him locked in. So now as he retreats back, I can keep this on him for a second and then roll it up. Versus just letting him walk off of it, do his own little merry thing. I kind of keep this here, keep a little positive pressure, keep him from changing his mind about his choices, and then bring it up. But that's more of a style thing than anything. And there's even some debate back and forth between a couple of sensei. Like one was very much keep it on there the whole time they're going back, and the other one was like, I don't really need to keep it there the whole time. You know, I keep it there for a second, then I'm controlling. I'm using I'm using pressure from other things essentially rather than physical pressure to keep them from moving. So you're using your presence versus the pressure of the Joe. This is another prime kata where we run into issues with timing and distance. One point that they had for me was if you're doing it right, you shouldn't have to necessarily enter the space or advance on the second strike. So it's almost like a foot change in a way. So you're here, if you're doing it properly, this left foot should really only have to come up about as far as the right foot was. You shouldn't have to enter the space more than what you were. Because the Tachi has cut to here, they pull back, and they cut to the same space. They're saying, well, why do you have to go in any further than that? Tachi's coming to get you. You don't have to necessarily close that space anymore. That. Okay. That was everything for number 9. We go back to number 10. I have on number 10.
Which one's number 10?
Number 10 is Sagon.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I was going to say that. I wasn't sure.
One where the Tachi has the sword in their belt. You want to hit me some more? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I think, like, talking about that.
Okay, Cynthia wants to talk a little bit about the skis.
We do all the shots that we've done, well, but you got hit, so you probably know better than what it was you were saying. But, you know, like, you can
I'm not going to.
get the idea of how it works.
You're talking on number 9 or just all of them?
In general, because a lot of them, they get you several times. You know, what you do.
So, yeah. So I had the pleasure of receiving, since they needed additional instruction on his skis, so I got to be the techie. I was showing how to get hit properly, I guess. Yeah, right. So I guess, like I talked about a little earlier, is making sure, like when you're performing a ski, like when you get in, so like if I'm in Honte, when I get into Kaishi ski, top of this hand should be over the top. Shouldn't be here, shouldn't be here. Should be where it's going to be when I make that strike. So if I trace that back, it's there. That way I don't have to do any twisting or anything else, which is going to cause, if I have to twist this, you're going to start to get this thing that's going on here.
They were also talking about how this is the contact point, right?
Yes.
Not this. And
yeah, so
basically the bending you over almost was the huge punch. It was just something they did that
sure.
was
Since
not quite how we
they're talking about too, they really reiterated the point that you're hitting your opponents with on your strike is the edge of this Joe. It's more or less the sharp part of the Joe, right? So instead of thinking about, we're ramming in this way, it's more like we're taking that edge, and that's what's going in first. So you're focusing the pressure on that edge. So I'm here. So when you see them do their strikes, it's more like out and kind of like down versus like straight. It's not like pool cue. It's kind of like this. I don't know. Like I said, it's almost like it's like dropping. Yeah, it shouldn't be though. So yeah, yeah, I would say here.
Yep. And then one like a number. Well, we do it on 3, but on later kata too. When you make that transition, say, and at this point, weren't they also like this is where they kept hitting you was on these strikes, wasn't it? It wasn't so much on the Kaishi ski, it was making that transition here, and then this kind of boom thing, wasn't it? And that wasn't that the one that they kept getting you on?
Well, yeah.
So how is that? There's a difference between that and the Kaishi ski. So that's where I wasn't catching the difference, right? The Kaishi ski, like you say, you're making a big transition, you're pushing in and stepping.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, you're just really supposed to be stepping. So it wasn't. That's why there's still a blankness there for me on what are they
Sure.
trying to tell me about this that I'm not doing right?
So the biggest,
what is the expectation?
the expectation on this is just like we talked about, but people aren't doing it so much as like there's still a lot of like there's a lot of arm movement versus it's really, all it really is you're just getting your body into it.
This is where you heard a lot of people stomping too.
Yeah, there's a lot of people doing weird stomps and things like that.
You know, and,
Must be a core use thing. But yeah.
So this actually brings up a good question then. So with Kaishiski and the technique for this kata, where you're trying to use more of the edge on the strike for the thrust point. So with Kaishiski, also we're actually trying to use the flat of the jo because we're actually trying to push the opponent, strike and push at the same time with an actual thrust. We're not trying to actually angle it in a way that the Joseki's edge is being what's pushed into the body. Is that correct?
No, it should be for both.
Oh, so you
always,
are supposed to, in Kaishiski as well, you're supposed to strike with the edge.
Correct. You should be striking with the edge on all of them.
Oh, okay. So
You
lower that right into the back.
yeah, you're just changing the way. Instead of the joke coming in this way, it's just coming in this way. It's still the same. It's just.
I think a lot of us are not lowering the back.
well, the reason why I asked that specifically is I know for a fact the way that I've been using the Kaichiski strike, I've been focusing on putting more of the force towards the circular part of the jo. I could probably find my jo real quick. But so I wasn't thinking about the edge of the jo in that process when I was using my Kaichiski strikes. So that's the reason why I kind of wanted to get a little more clarity on that, because I was under the impression that the Kaichiski is a thrust, yes, but it's also a push at the same time. But what you're saying, it's a thrust, push, and a strike.
Well, yeah. I mean, in reality, you're doing that thrust to do damage. You're not just trying to necessarily push them back. It's not just a push them back or whatnot. It's like I'm going to jam you in the guts and make you stop attacking me.
Well, that's why I'm making a difference on that as well, because the circular front of the jo being pushed into someone is going to hurt, and it would still push the opponent. That's why I say thrust and push, but what it's supposed to be a thrust, push, and strike. So you're supposed to use the edge of the joseki even in Kaishiski, which is something I wasn't aware of.
Well, none of us were. That's why we were all striking with the flat of the jo versus thinking about the cutting edge or the sharp part. So yeah.
Thank you very much for that clarity.
Yeah, it'll be a work in progress for everybody. Did
Yes.
I answer your question? Did you want to? So big things for number 10 is that we got this from that Yondan that came through here earlier this summer, but when we initially learned it, it was talking about striking the Tachi's wrist when they're going for their sword here, but your target is the sugets of your opponent. So you're stepping out one, they go for it, you shoot out towards the eyes. One point that Sarah had got during when she was working on it is this left hand actually comes across right away. So like it's boom and then boom. The notes I have when we first learned it was more like thrust out and then this kind of hand comes up together. But even in the green book, it says this happens at the same time. And then you're striking down and you're landing on the opponent so you get when they're trying to draw their sword. Okay, do that. You're there. You're actually this way. No, you're not. You're this way. So then you go into Agassiz Dojo. At this point here, we did clarify because there were some people doing this slightly different. The sequence of this is you have to, first things first, you have to get this left hand out of the way. So this drops down first. Then you step back. This goes up into that hasso type position and then strike out. If your uchi doesn't have step back far enough, at this point you can slide back a little further if you have to, but if they're doing it right, you shouldn't have to move. Typically it should just be boom, 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 boom. But if they don't have the proper distance, Boylan Sensei was talking to me about this, you can slide back and come back in. Sequence again is get the target out of the way first. So this first, then the foot, then up into the sasso, and then strike out. When you're doing the cut as the tachi, you've drawn your sword back. When you step into cut, make sure that when you cut through, your body should be turned open. So when the jo hits you, it's hitting you flat here versus being pivoted and you're getting clipped in the chest with that sharp end of that jo. You want to be a little more open. This is more just a safety thing than anything.
Okay. So just to clarify what you said there real quickly, just because some random stuff's happening here over my side. When you're striking, the strike is actually to make sure that it's in line to where you could use the jo tip. However, for the sake of safety, we actually extend a little bit further and actually hit with the flat of the jo. Correct?
No, I was talking, this is more when you're on the tachi side. So if I'm the tachi, oops, sorry, Sarah.
Oh,
I'm the
whoops, I
tachi.
misunderstood.
Yeah, so I'm the tachi, I'm here. When I go to do my cut and I come through, you want to be open more so that the jo hits you here flat versus being.
Okay. So this is Tachi you're talking. Okay, I'll change my notes there real quickly.
You hit like this versus this. Especially if I decide to go on a gender bender and I get big old booby implants. Like I don't want to get hit there. I want to be hit sideways.
Hi.
Yeah. But they said specifically for the females, you want to make sure that you're definitely more sideways. So you're not getting batted around.
How it hurt?
So another thing with the tachi piece too is when you draw out, the way we initially learned it was you're here, you kind of start to try to move. The Joe comes at you here, and they talked about kind of drawing back like this. But what they've since clarified now is like it's more, it doesn't make sense to draw back that way. It's more almost like a Kesagiri cut. So here, Michael, help me show this. So just go to your, just get me locked up here. So you're here. So you got me here. Before, you had my wrist like this, but they're saying that the strike is actually here. So I actually have full control here. So what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to cut him underneath, right? So now go do that. So as he does that, it's almost more of, like I said, a Kesagiri cut, because I'm coming up here so I can turn and try to cut there. Because it doesn't make sense for me. It doesn't make sense for me to draw the sword way back here just so I can try to bring it in and cut him. I want to just bring it up as far as I need to so I can bring it down and cut. So it's more up, down.
So, Mike, because you say it's like a Kesagiri cut, can I treat it in the same way as the technique of a Kesagiri cut, or should I be more lax in that response to that? Just because, what I mean is, because I know in Kesagiri, I see how the motion you're pulling through it, you're kind of moving in that motion where you're still, so thankfully I have my phone sword here. You're coming through up like this, whereas you're not coming through and out like this and extending for the cut and then coming back. Do you know what I'm saying? So let me do it from this angle. So Kesagiri, you come out like this when you do Kesagiri. So what you're saying is you would come more like this. You would have a cheated Kesagiri, not like a true Kesagiri. Because the true Kesagiri could potentially be an actual cut. Or do you mean I want to commit to an actual cut in that motion when I'm drawing the sword out?
Watch it one more time here. So you can do the whole thing, or just that?
Just that.
No, whatever. Okay. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay.
Like this, right? Just draw like you're cutting.
So yeah, I'm gonna try to get him here. Now I need to kind of retreat back a little more too.
But I think what you were saying about the timing of the show too. And I can just strike the wrist. That's easy for you. One, and even if you were close enough to step in and poke me, right? So I think before what we were doing was it was all together,
right?
Which still works, but you got to get that. Well, I think part of it too is you were saying down here instead of up here, right? Isn't there something about that too? To make your key, you were saying bring it, don't raise the right hand up, but now, is now what it is?
Yeah, so you're here. you don't have to do any extraneous movement with this right hand. You just want to get this one out of the way, and then up again.
So it's on the leg shifting back that you would bring up in the hostile.
Yeah.
You can keep the right hand where it is.
Well, you don't have to, this whole motion here doesn't have to complete before you step back. It's just that this has to start first. A lot of people were here, leaving this out here and stepping back. It's getting this out of the way and then coming.
We thought this, it sounds like, as long as it's close.
Yep. We should have moved our table under the heater. You're the only one that's got fancy socks on. Yeah, the last thing I had on number 10 was one of the sensei got kind of a little into the why, a little bit of the why. So the reason why, like when you're the sword and you're here, like the kata is prescribed that we cut and then we step, right? Which is weird, right? So the reason you do that is you have a weapon right here, so you don't want to step into this. That's why you're essentially cutting to clear that and then come in. You got me there. If we pause there, I really don't want to step into this thing. Because like he can either take me here, you could probably easily take that up into my face or whatever else. So that's technically I'm here. So I'm just going to go for what I see as open without endangering myself. So I'm going to just cut there. So I make a cut, he gets out of the way, and then I step in. So that was the last point on number 10. Correct. But what it also like, it's like, well, why am I going for that versus head? Well, because I can't step and get to his head because now that's why I'm gonna try to take the risk. And oops, that didn't work. For the Gakutai strike?
Oh, because I mean, I'm here, to come out, I could just pop right in your head and just check, you know. You just went to my hand, I'm gonna take you out, man.
Okay. Oh, I did have one more point on that one. So they did talk about another. So like you see this in number 12 too, at the very end of number 12. It's also a similar thing at the end of number 10, where after we've done this, when it's boom, boom, you simply take an extra beat here. So don't make it boom, boom, boom. Make it, oops, sorry. Boom, boom. I freaking own you. Boom. So you're supposed to like hold this for a beat there and then strike. Yeah. Yep. Because like just it's kind of exactly to your point there, Sensei, right? Like you're here, it's like, hey, hey, bro, I could cave your skull in right now. But instead, whap, and give you a little. So that was a nice. Another recommendation we had on that one is it's some point try to do it like when you're doing the tachi, like use one of your plastic saya, so that way you can see what you would actually have to do in order to draw the sword versus being able to just magic saya. Whew. So you actually have to thinking about where I have to move this in order to draw it out. Yeah, he didn't. You're attacking me wrong. So that was number 10. Oh yeah, going to number 11 then. Unless I find an extra note on number 10. I don't see any. Okay, so number 11. The big takeaways on number 11 is when you're doing that first initial exchange, so you come up, remember it starts like number 3, you come here, you go out, and it's like number 7, you strike, you come in, and then at this point you go back into the Hiki Otoshi thing. At this point, the uchi comes in and is going to try to cut you essentially in your lower back. And this is where you're going to, your hands are you're still in like a gyakute grip. So you're bringing the sword, you're bringing the jo up and you're essentially sticking it right in the Tachi's eyes, which causes him to essentially pull his cut, or his cut comes up short. Which makes this, before we were kind of like, we had this like kind of like off to the side of their head or whatnot, but this should be right in front of their eyes. But they like, when you see the sensei do it, they kind of like almost like pull back a little bit. From there, at this point, when I let go of this hand and I kind of bring this up and step back, the Tachi, who is kind of like lean, kind of like hold the cut or whatnot, they straighten up and they bring their sword back online because they want to get back into a position where they can attack, right? They they regain their balance, come back on center. The second they're back up, I'm already here, striking down. I'm striking down with the Ihazuchi essentially. And I'm leaving my head open for them to come get me. At that point, I shuffle back. They're cutting, remember, they're cutting where my head is, not where it's going to be. They cut here. I shuffle back, catch them with Maki Atoshi. We also need to work on our Maki Atoshi. So, okay. Something wants me to say everything again, but we're going to narrate through it. So, okay, so we're going to fast forward. So, boom, boom, boom. I'm here. Stop him. Wase. Here. Strike him. Here. He goes back. I pull back in this. Now, this is where it gets a little different, right? So he's going to come and try to cut me. I'm putting this right in his face. Yep. So he's there. Yeah. So at this point, I'm going to pull back. He's going to center up. Yep. So he regains his posture. He puts his back on the center. Strike it down. in your head, catching that where it was. Flick, pressure the eyes again, whatever this thing's called. Catching here. Now the same points we talked about with Tayatari. So I'm bringing this in. This comes up to his eyes. I'm getting pretty close. Joe is pretty much extended, and I've got his hands almost above his head. And I can feel that kind of have him going backwards a little bit. Now, all I do is I essentially step through and apply the strike. Same time that happens, I'm pulling back here. And then from here, it's just Hikyotoshi and follow through.
So we can talk a little bit about your Hikyotoshi techniques too. So they were showing buffalo and how you're switching it. You can also talk about touching
Mm-hmm. You want to we say that into it. So yeah, a couple things we're going to work on in terms of Kihon. They gave us okay. So they gave us a lot of pointers on Hikyotoshi and how that should look, how it should feel. So we got some stuff we can try to break down with you guys there. It was funny because, you know, like a couple of weeks before we went to seminar, we kind of started talking about, like, pay attention to that dead hand, right? First thing happens when we get out there, Louis Sensei starts picking on Sensei's like, what's going on with that hand there? It was almost like he like had a bug in the dojo, but like they picked up on that right away, and it was constant. Like every time the Sensei were walking around, if you didn't have your hand in the cutting grip, they were nailing you for it. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, you made a point to come over and check on us.
You did say though that the test is way better.
Yeah.
But what he's talking about is not that you just kind of let this right here. So a lot of times Itachi sort of gets an attitude of once you've been knocked back, you're just relaxing now. You're not active anymore. You're not participating, so your grip loosens up like that. I think just in general, the Tachi needs to remember that they're actively trying to engage and cut the Jo every and any opportunity that they have, and that's probably not the attitude that we've had. It's just I'm following the pattern that we're doing here because it's a kata, I know it's next, and I know I'm going to lose, right? But instead, one of the things that they showed a lot of the why at the seminar of, well, the Tachi does this because he wants to step in and cut, or the Tachi does this because he's going to try to do this cut, or the Jo needs to be careful because if he doesn't, the Tachi's going to go like that, and and get him all these different things, right? So we were talking about this, and just beware that if you're doing kata with either of us now, that we're going to be an active Tachi. And we're not going to do anything to hurt anybody, but we're going to show you where you're vulnerable. Right? If we can find a vulnerability, we will show you. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. But well, of course it does. So, like I said, we're not going to hurt anybody, but if you're standing there and you do something wrong and I can step in and poke you, I might just step in and poke you, right? So you have to make sure that you're doing the techniques that protect yourself and make me feel the pressure, right? But I think that dead hand is a really big thing that everybody should just be aware of, that it's not okay. Yeah, and you come from a Jodan and down into here, and it's really easy just to have that hand open. So, yep. Anyway, we'll talk about that again. Anything else?
So the last note I had on number 11, which applies to apply to costume as well. So when I've got you up in Tayatari up here, like, you had this question before too. So as the Joe, what do I want to do after I push this guy? Well, essentially, I want to get the hell out of the way as fast as I can, because like if I push him, let's say I don't push him far enough, like, or not hard enough, like you think about kendo, like hikikote, like, so if I'm here, so yeah, you could take my arm off, you could take my head off. So what I want to do is I want to push him, and I don't want to get back. So yeah, don't wait, out here like this. There was a little, I don't even talk about that because it's Corey stuff. But yeah, since you don't sit here like Kodak moment, like, oh, I shoved you so far, now I'm going to step back. More like push and then get back right away. We were able to work through some of the higher level sotai, the paired kihon. So we got some of that stuff we can work on too and show you guys. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it for the kata. There's one more note I was going to say, but I can't find it. Yeah, I kind of go back to the point that Sensei was talking about, like, and Michael had hinted at this earlier about, we always talk about the weapon going downrange first. Yeah, if you don't do that, it's very easy for the sword to get you. Like, I got stabbed multiple times because I was a hair too quick on my movements versus, like, I was still here, but I was starting to move. Boom, I had a sword in my gut multiple times. So really making sure that this is getting out in front of you before you're moving. And also making sure this goes back to strike to where your opponent is, right? So like when we're doing those big Hikiotoshi strikes at the end, we don't need to be trying to go halfway across the continent with our strikes, because what I just did there is I came in too far and I left myself open, essentially. I got stabbed a couple times there as well. So wherever your opponent's head is, that's as far as you need to strike. So get up, strike, and stop. Yeah. And that is the main thing I got on chicken scratch. Yeah, simply run it.
I guess closing comments is just, you know, we're gonna have to rethink some things and just sort of keep an open mind on learning and relearning some of the things. It's not gonna be huge. I didn't feel like we missed a whole bunch, but the Kuduk Day is really something. We are gonna do a little more vocabulary review too. I think I want people to think through doing the Kihon. You're gonna naturally learn some of the vocabulary, like what is this move called? Oh, that's Taitari. What is this move called? Oh, that's Makiotoshi, right? So that when we have these conversations, we all know what the terminology is and what the action that accompanies the terminology is. I think that's something we all need to do a little more diligence on. And I think again, it's just we all started as swords people and men. So we need to keep in mind that the Jo is the primary part of Jodo, but the Tachi is equally important, and we should be swords people when we're doing the role of the Tachi, not just be a noodle who gets beat around the floor all day, right? So challenging the Jo to stay covered and to have pressure, to give pressure and all of that. So yeah, there's a lot to do. I don't think we're super far off. I think we just need a little tweaking on some things. So thanks, Mike, for taking notes, because I did horribly at it. I was more watching and trying to input it into my brain, figuring that you would come back with the details. And we're a good team on that. But